Ma'am, I've already told you, you can't board yet. Step aside. The voice was loud, sharp, and intentionally demeaning. Passengers waiting in the queue glanced up from their phones, curious about the commotion. Standing tall in a sleek navy blue pantsuit, Gabrielle James adjusted her glasses and looked directly at the gate agent. I'm in first class. Flight 118 to DC, check your list again. The gate agent, a young man named Todd with a tightly knotted tie and a chip on his shoulder, crossed his arms. I don't care what seat you say you're in. You don't look like someone flying first class. So either step aside or I'll call security. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gabrielle raised one perfectly groomed eyebrow. You're making a mistake. Todd chuckled. I doubt it. That's when a voice from behind called out, clear and firm. Madam Secretary, we're ready for you now. All eyes turned to see a uniformed TSA supervisor approaching, flanked by two airport officials. Todd blinked. Wait, what? Gabrielle didn't respond to him. Instead, she nodded to the TSA officer. Thank you. Let's proceed. As she walked past Todd, her boarding pass scanned without issue, leaving him stunned, red-faced, and utterly humiliated. Gabrielle took her seat in first class, the plush leather cushioning her as she exhaled slowly. Across the aisle, other passengers whispered. She was used to it by now. Madam Secretary, the youngest and only black woman ever appointed as the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. Her reputation for unshakable poise and brilliant reforms preceded her. But no matter how many accolades she earned, incidents like the one at the gate followed her. Some people just don't learn, she murmured, sipping her sparkling water. Back at the gate, Todd stood motionless, watching the plane taxi away. His supervisor stepped beside him, jaw tight. You just disrespected a cabinet member. There will be consequences. And there would be. As the plane soared into the sky, Gabrielle leaned her head back and closed her eyes. The familiar hum of the engines was a small comfort, but her mind wasn't on the flight. It drifted back to where it all began as she'd grown up in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., an area often ignored by policymakers, riddled with potholes, broken streetlights, and forgotten promises. Her mother, Angela James, was a city bus driver who worked double shifts to make ends meet and raise Gabrielle with fierce determination and high expectations. Don't let them tell you what box you fit in, baby, her mom would say. You build a box, then you tell them how it works. It wasn't easy. She'd been underestimated at every stage. In high school, she was accused of cheating after scoring the highest SAT score at her district. At MIT, professors sometimes mistook her for a student aide rather than one of the brightest minds in civil engineering. But she didn't let the insults stop her. She let them fuel her. Gabrielle's drive led her from the rough neighborhoods of DC to top honors at MIT, then into the world of infrastructure reform, where she quickly gained a reputation as a genius with grit. Before long, the president took notice and appointed her to a position that would change her life forever. Now, she was Madam Secretary. But she never forgot who she was or where she came from. By the time Flight 118 touched down in Washington, D.C., Gabrielle's phone had lit up with dozens of notifications. Somehow, someone had recorded the entire gate confrontation and posted it online. Within hours, the video had gone viral. The headline on one news site read, "Gate agent stops black cabinet secretary, gets humbled in public on social media. Hashtags like hashtag Madam Secretary, hashtag flying while black, and hashtag respect black women trended globally. Even major media outlets picked it up. One commentator said, "This is a reminder of how far we still have to go. That a powerful, educated black woman can be treated like this, just because of what someone assumes by looking at her, is unacceptable." AirConnect Airlines scrambled into damage control mode. They issued a public apology and placed Todd on indefinite suspension pending an investigation. But the damage to their brand was already done. Meanwhile, Gabrielle refused to grant interviews. She knew this wasn't about just one man at a gate. It was about a system, and she intended to address it at the source. 3 days later, Gabrielle stood behind the podium at the Department of Transportation, cameras flashing and reporters crowding the briefing room. Though the press conference was initially scheduled to discuss a new infrastructure bill, everyone knew the topic on everyone's mind. She paused, took a sip of water, and looked straight into the sea of cameras. "Before we begin today, I want to address the incident at the airport," she said calmly. Reporters fell silent. "What happened to me is not new. It's a reality that too many Americans, especially Black Americans, face every single day. Being judged, dismissed, or dehumanized simply because of how we look." A murmur rolled through the room. But let me be clear, this is not about vengeance or going viral. It's about accountability. It's about changing systems that allow this kind of bias to thrive unchecked. She leaned forward slightly. "I was fortunate to have the title and the attention. But what about the people who don't? The students, the nurses, the single moms, the veterans? What happens when they are told to step aside? Who speaks for them?" The room was still. Gabrielle's voice was calm, but powerful, like a storm beneath still water. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us. And that change starts today." Applause erupted, spontaneous and genuine. In the following weeks, the story of Todd's disrespectful behavior went viral. News outlets, social media platforms, and everyday people all had something to say. Todd, who had never expected the consequences of his actions to reach such a magnitude, found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't control. His supervisors, embarrassed by his outburst, issued a public apology, but the damage was done. The narrative had already been shaped, and it was not one that cast Todd in a positive light. Gabrielle had become a symbol of grace and strength, while Todd's name was now synonymous with ignorance and prejudice on social media. Memes were created, news segments analyzed every minute of the confrontation, and people voiced their support for Gabrielle. Many saw her as an example of resilience in the face of systemic issues, not just for Black Americans, but for all marginalized groups who had faced similar treatment in various settings. Gabrielle, on the other hand, remained unfazed by the growing media storm. She was used to it by now. This wasn't the first time she had been publicly vilified, nor would it be the last. As the first Black woman to hold the position of Secretary of Transportation, she was a target for criticism at every turn. But she had developed a thick skin over the years, fueled by the knowledge that her work was making a real difference in the country. The weeks that followed saw an outpouring of support. Advocacy groups and civil rights organizations reached out to her, praising her for handling the situation with dignity and strength. Her personal phone was flooded with messages from people who had experienced similar encounters, thanking her for speaking up on their behalf. Despite the wave of support, there were still those who criticized her for not allowing the situation to go unnoticed, those who argued that she had simply created more division. They would not understand that Gabrielle wasn't fighting for herself, but for a system where everyone could be treated with fairness and respect. Gabrielle's calm and composed response to the incident at the gate only strengthened her public image. While Todd's career spiraled downward, Gabrielle's leadership reached new heights. In the days following the confrontation, she made it a point to address the situation at a press conference, standing before the cameras with a poise that had earned her the respect of both her peers and the public. "I want to be very clear about something," Gabrielle began, her voice steady and unwavering. "This incident is not about one individual's poor behavior. It's about a broader issue that affects many of us every day. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, is treated with dignity and respect." Her words resonated deeply with her audience. Gabrielle wasn't seeking to destroy Todd or anyone like him. She was asking for a commitment to change, not only from those in positions of power, but from society as a whole. This was the lesson she wanted to impart. When people fail to uphold the values of respect and inclusion, they must be held accountable. But true progress requires more than simply punishing those who falter. It requires creating a culture where these values are ingrained at every level. Todd's fate had been sealed. His career as a gate agent was over, and the media coverage of the incident meant that even other job opportunities in the airport industry were scarce. His name was now associated with disgrace, and no amount of apology could erase the damage done. But it wasn't just Todd who suffered the consequences. His actions had set a precedent for how incidents of racial prejudice should be addressed, and soon, other employees in similar positions were being scrutinized for their behavior. Gabrielle's stand had sparked a movement within the airport industry, with new training programs being introduced to ensure that all employees were educated on racial sensitivity and the importance of treating all passengers with respect. Todd, sitting at home in his small apartment, had ample time to reflect on his actions. The guilt weighed heavily on him. He had never realized the gravity of the position he was in, or how much a single interaction could shape someone's perception of the world. The incident had not only cost him his job, but it had also opened his eyes to his own prejudices and biases. He began attending therapy, seeking to better understand his own behavior and the impact it had on others. For Gabrielle, the situation had become a teaching moment. While she could never erase the sting of such incidents, she used her platform to advocate for systemic change. She pushed for legislation that would provide more resources to communities impacted by racial discrimination, and she became a mentor for young women of color, encouraging them to enter public service and leadership roles. As the weeks passed, the story of the gate agent confrontation with Gabrielle continued to make headlines, spreading beyond the airport and capturing the attention of national media outlets. Gabrielle was invited to speak on several talk shows, and her message resonated with countless individuals who had faced similar discrimination. Her stance on accountability not only strengthened her position as Secretary of Transportation, but also fueled discussions about systemic racism in the workplace, particularly in industries that serve the public. Gabrielle's story was one of resilience and the quiet power of not responding in anger, but in action. Her position gave her a unique platform to push for broader reforms. She proposed new initiatives to improve airport security policies, emphasizing diversity and inclusion in all levels of airport staff. For the first time, A national conversation about bias in air travel and other public services began to take shape. That a week later, Gabrielle stood before a packed room of lawmakers and industry leaders, presenting her new proposal for nationwide policy changes. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We cannot ignore these issues anymore. It's time for a national reckoning, one that goes beyond individual incidents and focuses on the systems that perpetuate bias." While Gabrielle was working on transforming the system, the public support for her was unwavering. People from all walks of life, from high-ranking officials to everyday citizens, reached out with messages of encouragement. It was clear that Gabrielle's ability to handle the situation with grace had left a lasting impact. Unexpectedly, Gabrielle received a message from one of the passengers who had been on the same flight. The message read, "I was on your flight, and I witnessed what happened at the gate. I want to say thank you. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to be silent in the face of injustice. Your composure and dignity reminded me of what it means to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." The message moved Gabrielle, and she took the time to personally respond. She was grateful for the support, but also reminded the person that this was a shared responsibility. It wasn't just her fight, it was everyone's. The real work lay in continuing the work for change, not resting on past victories. That Gabrielle's efforts to foster empathy and understanding extended beyond legislation. She organized town halls and workshops in cities across the country, encouraging open conversations about racial inequality and how it could be addressed on a broader scale. It became clear that her response to the incident at the airport wasn't just about one flight or one gate agent. It was about a larger movement, one that would hopefully lead to lasting change. In a surprising turn of events, Todd reached out to Gabrielle, requesting a meeting. He had come a long way since the incident, and after months of introspection, he knew he had to take responsibility for his actions. That he asked if they could meet in person. Gabrielle, always willing to foster dialogue, agreed. They met at a coffee shop near Gabrielle's office, an atmosphere far removed from the tense scene at the airport. Todd sat across from Gabrielle, nervously stirring his coffee. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I want to apologize. I can't undo what happened, but I can at least try to make things right. I've been working on myself, going to therapy, reading, trying to understand what led me to treat you the way I did. It's not an excuse, but I want to do better. I want to help others learn from my mistakes." Gabrielle listened attentively, recognizing the sincerity in Todd's voice. She nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, Todd. Acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward growth. But it's more than just making apologies. It's about taking action, especially when we're in positions to influence others." Todd nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I want to use what happened as an opportunity to educate others. I know it's going to take time, but I'm committed to being part of the solution." Gabrielle gave him a small smile. "I think you're on the right path." As Gabrielle continued her work on broadening the conversation around inequality and discrimination, an unexpected event unfolded that added an extra layer of complexity to her mission. The news of Todd's personal growth and his effort to redeem himself after the airport incident went public. Gabrielle hadn't anticipated the media attention Todd's transformation would garner, but it sparked a nationwide discussion on forgiveness, redemption, and the possibility of change within a flawed system. Many people applauded Todd for owning up to his actions, while others questioned if such a change could happen on a larger scale within institutions. Despite the mixed responses, Gabrielle recognized that these kinds of dialogues were necessary. They were uncomfortable, but that discomfort was the catalyst for the growth that was needed in society. She knew that for real transformation to occur, people had to be willing to acknowledge their mistakes and take actionable steps toward making amends, just as Todd had done at a press conference. Gabrielle was asked about the situation with Todd. She was direct but compassionate in her response. "I believe in the power of accountability. We all make mistakes, but how we respond to those mistakes defines who we are. Todd has taken responsibility for his actions, and I commend him for doing the work to better understand the impact of his behavior. We are all capable of change, but it requires effort, self-reflection, and a commitment to do better moving forward." Her words resonated with many, especially those who had been on the receiving end of mistreatment. Gabrielle had always believed that justice didn't just mean punishment. It also meant the chance for people to grow, learn, and ultimately contribute positively to society. As Gabrielle's work continued to gain momentum, she received an invitation to speak at the National Diversity and Inclusion Conference. The event, which brought together business leaders, lawmakers, and advocates for social change, had a reputation for addressing systemic issues with actionable solutions. Gabrielle's speech was the highlight of the conference, with attendees hanging on her every word. She spoke not just about the incident at the airport, but about the larger systemic issues that existed within government agencies, businesses, and public services. She called on everyone in the room to take action, because change couldn't come from one individual alone. "We are all connected in this fight for justice," Gabrielle declared, standing before a sea of professionals who held the power to make a real difference. "It's not enough to simply talk about these issues. We must actively dismantle the systems that perpetuate them. The work is hard, but it is worth it, and it starts with each one of us." Her words echoed far beyond the walls of the conference room, sparking a wave of grassroots efforts and collaborations aimed at making long-lasting changes. Companies pledged to invest in diversity initiatives, and government agencies revamped their training programs to ensure that employees were held accountable for any behavior that contradicted the values of equality and respect. Months passed, and Gabrielle found herself not only leading the charge in policy reforms, but also seeing firsthand how attitudes within various sectors were starting to shift. Public services, particularly in airports, began to reflect more inclusive practices, with new protocols in place to ensure that all passengers, regardless of their background, were treated with dignity and respect. Her position as Secretary of Transportation had been a platform for much-needed change. But Gabrielle knew the work was far from over. She continued to push for better hiring practices, anti-bias training, and reforms in transportation and infrastructure that would create equal access to opportunities for all citizens. Todd, for his part, had become a public advocate for racial equality in the workplace. With Gabrielle's encouragement, he launched a foundation focused on helping individuals from marginalized communities enter the workforce, ensuring that they had the resources and support needed to succeed. What had started as a tense confrontation at an airport gate had led to far-reaching consequences. Consequences that transformed not just the lives of those involved, but also society as a whole. Gabrielle's story was a reminder that sometimes the greatest challenges led to the most important changes. It was proof that standing firm in the face of adversity, refusing to be silent, and embracing accountability could bring about a new era of leadership, one where empathy, understanding, and justice were no longer optional, but essential. As Gabrielle wrapped up her term as the Secretary of Transportation, her legacy was firmly cemented in the fabric of the nation's progress. Her initiatives were not just legislation. They were the beginnings of a societal shift, a shift that she believed could eventually make the world a more inclusive and equitable place for everyone. But Gabrielle wasn't ready to retire into a comfortable life just yet. Her commitment to service and her drive to continue making a difference had only grown stronger over time. She received numerous offers to speak at global summits, advise international organizations, and write books about her experiences. But it wasn't just about the accolades or the recognition. Gabrielle knew that true change came when the conversation extended beyond political offices and corporate boardrooms and into the hearts of the everyday people whose lives depended on that change point one sunny afternoon. As Gabrielle was taking a walk in the park, she was stopped by an elderly man with a cane. He smiled warmly at her, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. "Excuse me, Miss James," the man began, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "I wanted to personally thank you. I don't know if you remember me, but I was the gate agent I was the one who treated you poorly that day." Gabrielle looked at him, recognizing the familiar face. It was Todd, the same man who had once been rude and dismissive toward her at the airport. Her eyes softened. "I remember you, Todd," she said, her voice filled with empathy. "I'm glad you took the time to come and speak with me." Todd chuckled nervously. "I've been trying to find you for months. I've been working with my own team, and we've been focusing on diversity and respect. I wanted to apologize for my actions that day. I was ignorant, and I've learned so much from you since then. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to make change." Gabrielle smiled, her heart full. "You don't have to thank me. You made the change on your own. I'm proud of you." It was a full circle moment, one that symbolized the impact of their encounter. Todd, once a symbol of ignorance and prejudice, had grown into a beacon of hope for others, using his experience to teach about the importance of understanding and empathy. In the years that followed, Gabrielle continued her fight for justice on a broader stage. With her newfound influence, she launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing mentorship and resources to young people from underserved communities. The organization focused on giving them the tools to succeed in any field they desired, offering programs that range from academic scholarships to job placement opportunities. Gabrielle's work, combined with Todd's personal journey, became a powerful example of what could be achieved when people decided to look beyond their biases and build a future based on mutual respect and understanding. It was clear that their encounter, which had started with an airport confrontation, had turned into something much bigger. A movement point. One of her biggest accomplishments was a nationwide initiative aimed at bridging the racial gap in corporate leadership. Gabrielle worked tirelessly to ensure that the voices of those who had been marginalized were heard in the highest rooms of decision-making. But despite her many successes, Gabrielle remained grounded. She never lost sight of the lessons learned along the way. Every obstacle, every setback, and every confrontation, no matter how challenging, had contributed to the person she was today. As Gabrielle looked out over the bustling city from the windows of her office, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The changes she had worked so tirelessly to bring about were already becoming part of the everyday fabric of society. But even more rewarding than the policies and the laws was the realization that she had inspired so many others to rise to the occasion, to challenge the status quo, to confront injustices head-on, and to never back down in the pursuit of equality. Gabrielle had done what many thought was impossible. She had proven that one individual, standing firm in the face of adversity, could spark an entire movement. And with every life she touched, Gabrielle's legacy of courage, compassion, and transformation would continue to grow. Her work was far from finished, but Gabrielle knew that the seed she had planted would eventually bear fruit, long after she had moved on to the next chapter of her life. And so, Gabrielle James, the youngest and first Black woman to serve as the Secretary of Transportation, remained a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of one person to change the world. As Gabrielle moved forward into her post office life, she received an unexpected call that would once again test her resolve. The invitation came from an old acquaintance, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, but whose name had always carried weight. It was a challenge, an invitation to help mediate a tense situation that had been brewing for months within the ranks of a prominent global corporation. The company, which had recently faced backlash for its lack of diversity and its exclusionary practices, was now facing protests from both employees and the public. They needed someone with a proven track record in diversity, equity, and inclusion to help facilitate a change. Gabrielle knew this was more than just another consulting gig. This was an opportunity to make a real impact on a global scale. After a few moments of deliberation, Gabrielle knew what she had to do. This challenge was too important to turn down. With her vast experience in both public service and grassroots activism, she knew exactly how to bring about lasting change. The stakes were high, but Gabrielle was never one to shy away from a battle, especially when it meant helping others. The atmosphere at the headquarters of the global corporation was tense. Employees were on edge, and senior executives sat behind closed doors, scrambling to come up with a solution to the crisis at hand. But Gabrielle had seen this type of chaos before. It was nothing new. When she entered the boardroom on her first day, the executives were nervous, their eyes darting between each other. They had heard about Gabrielle's reputation, but no one truly understood the strength she carried until they saw her in action. "Good morning," Gabrielle said calmly, her voice steady but firm. "I'm here to help you navigate this situation. But I want to make one thing clear. This won't be an easy process. It will require accountability, introspection, and, most importantly, a willingness to change." The executives exchanged uncertain glances, but Gabrielle was undeterred. She had a plan, and she was ready to get to work. Over the next several weeks, Gabrielle immersed herself in the company's culture, speaking with employees from every level. She hosted town halls where employees could voice their frustrations and organized workshops focused on diversity, inclusion, and unconscious bias. Gabrielle's approach was holistic. She knew that real change came when everyone, not just the leaders, was on board. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was progress. And for Gabrielle, that was what mattered most. One afternoon, after a particularly heated meeting with the CEO, Gabrielle decided to take a walk around the company's sprawling campus. As she strolled through the outdoor courtyard, She was approached by an older woman who, to her surprise, looked familiar. "Madam Secretary, I didn't expect to see you here," the woman said with a warm smile. Gabrielle looked closely. The woman's face triggered a memory. It was the TSA agent from the airport, the one who had intervened when Todd, the rude gate agent, had tried to block her from boarding the flight all those years ago. Well, Gabrielle said with a smile. "It's good to see you again. What brings you here?" The woman, now wearing a smart corporate outfit, explained that she had recently been hired as the company's new head of diversity and inclusion. Gabrielle was stunned. It seemed that the lessons from that moment at the airport had come full circle. "We've come a long way since then," the woman said. "I learned a lot from watching you, Madam Secretary. I've been using my platform to advocate for others who don't always get the recognition they deserve." Gabrielle felt a wave of pride. "I'm glad to hear that. It's people like you who help drive the change." They stood together for a few moments, reminiscing about that pivotal encounter at the airport and how far they had both come since that day. Gabrielle had always believed in the power of second chances, and now she saw another example of how a single act of kindness could create a ripple effect. With the company on its way to making meaningful changes, Gabrielle turned her attention to her next big goal: creating a nationwide network of leaders who were dedicated to continuing the fight for social justice. It was clear that no one person, no matter how influential, could make the changes that were needed on their own. Gabrielle wanted to ensure that the momentum continued long after her time in the corporate world had ended. She envisioned a leadership program that would train young professionals from all walks of life to be catalysts for change in their own communities. The goal was not just to fill boardrooms with diverse individuals, but to create leaders who could inspire future generations and lead with empathy and integrity. As she sat at her desk, reviewing the proposal for the program, Gabrielle smiled to herself. She knew this would be her lasting legacy, a legacy that would shape the future and create a world where everyone, regardless of their background or status, would have an equal opportunity to succeed. And so, Gabrielle James continued her journey, undeterred by the obstacles in her path and fueled by the belief that one person could make a difference if they were willing to stand up and fight for what was right.